I never thought I would get so into Edgar Allan Poe fanfic, but here we are. It started with What Moves the Dead, which is a TK Kingfisher book. I'm a slut for TK Kingfisher. Total simp. This is one of her best. It's a short, spooky, snack sized gothic novella. It's a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. Retelling inspired by, there's a lot of changes that she's made. It's creepy. It's fun. You should totally go read it. I'm not going to spoil it at all. After I loved that book so much, it made me want to go read the original. So I read the original. It was written in 1840. It's a short story. And it's about this guy who gets a letter from his best friend being like, hey, I want to come to my creepy mansion and figure out what the fuck is going on because there's some weird shit. So he runs on over, and it's this guy living in this falling apart mansion, and he lives with his sister who is clearly dying. Like, she's not looking good. And there's some like weird stuff going around, and everyone seems to be like a little off their rocker a little bit. And then shit gets weird. I'm not gonna spoil the original, even though it's been 200 years. You've had time to read it. Go read it. It's got all of the elements that you would want from a creepy gothic story. It's got the falling apart mansion. It's got isolation. It's got bad family. Hello. It's got weird family shit. Did I actually like reading it? Well, look, I was really disappointed. I know that it's bad taste to not like a classic. I'm uncultured swine, what can I say? There's also so much of that performative intellectualism that's tied with reading classics, and the inherent kind of shame of not liking it. Like, oh, I must not have liked it because I just didn't get it. I don't know if that's probably very few people's actual opinion, but that's sometimes what it feels like, you know? It's not like I don't enjoy books with meandering, kind of archaic prose. And it's not like I don't enjoy books that are layered and complicated and like have a lot of deep meaning to them that you kind of have to like think about. I don't really seek those books out. I like to be entertained. Sue me. But when those books do grab me, I enjoy myself. So it's not like I'm incapable of reading this book. It just wasn't my thing. I think it was just something about the prose that I just didn't jive with. But clearly the concept is like awesome. I want more of this concept. A few months later, after I'd read What Moves the Dead, the Netflix show The Fall of the House of Usher came out. And obviously I wanted more. It is not, I wouldn't say it's based on the book as much as it is inspired by it. The show takes a lot of liberties. It's almost unrecognizable except for a few like character names and beats and kind of the vibe. I think it does a really good job at keeping the spirit of The Fall of the House of Usher while still adding on the story that they wanted to tell. And those writers have not always impressed me. Sometimes they really hit it. Sometimes it's not my thing. But I feel like this was a hit for me. It was 4.5 stars. Like, not my favorite thing ever, but like well executed. I was in it. They kept a lot of the same themes of like loneliness and privilege and wealth and weird family drama that it had in the original and that it also had in What Moves the Dead. But the way that they set up the pacing kept it really fun and fast-paced for the show. They did a really good job of setting up foreboding. You know that something bad is going to happen in the episode. You just don't know how. I think that's one thing that the gothic genre does really well, is maintaining this beautiful foreboding of like everything is lush and also falling apart, and everything is death, but it's also love and life. And it's really kind of a poetic, lush genre that's really fun to wallow in. It's good. I'm glad that it's having a comeback. So I enjoyed the show. I enjoyed What Moves the Dead. And then I saw this book in a used bookstore and I was like, yeah, I'll do this. I'll read more of this. So this is Return of the House of Usher. It's meant to be a contemporary look into the descendants of the Usher and Poe families. So in this book, the fall of the House of Usher has happened, and then the descendants of both the Ushers and Edgar Allan Poe himself are kind of reliving this curse in a way. There are even a set of twins named Roderick and Madeline, and they're named after the brother and sister in the original, which seems a little distasteful to me. Like, The Fall of the House of Usher as a best-selling classic still exists in this universe, so it's not like the parents weren't aware of what they were doing to their children. They were like, no, yeah, this is cute. Let's name them Roddy and Maddie. After the terrible tragedy that befell their ancestors of the same name. This started out strong, but then it added some stuff. And if you've read The House of Usher, I just want you to think about what you feel like might be missing from the story, if anything. Would you want more ghosts, more flickering candles? Would you throw a vampire in there? Maybe like a sex scene or 7. Maybe it was missing just like a bit of spice. Maybe some dragons. Think about what you would add. Now, I want you to imagine that you've added a tortured male protagonist who is always horny and likes his whiskey too much. The town whore, as a love interest, of course, but also the down-on-her-luck single divorced mom with an abusive ex, who's also a love interest because she's a reasonable, fuckable woman in 20 years of the main character's age. She's within the range and she's available. So, also incest. What if you added just like a dash of incest? Also, what if you added a convoluted and extremely boring B plot about a land deal? Which, I'm sorry, how do you ever make a land deal interesting? Like, even if the mob is involved, I've just never seen that plotline work out, except like maybe once in a Hallmark Christmas movie, because that's really not about the plot at all. If that's the only successful place where that plotline works, I feel like that's not an endorsement. This didn't necessarily elevate Edgar Allan Poe's classic to a modern age, if that's what the author was trying to do, which really begs the question, what use are these retellings anyway? If they change so much of the story that it's only really inspired by the thing, does it even deserve to be called the same thing? Can't it be set free to be its own thing? Or does being attached to the classic make it have some sort of artistic merit it otherwise wouldn't have? Did it even need modernizing in the first place? What would have changed if the main character, John Charles, had gone back in time to the 1840s, other than the fact that I think they used the phone a few times and there's a 90s era computer? I genuinely don't think that very much would change in that story. Certainly nothing important. And like, does the retelling have to have a point of view that the original didn't have? Like all of those feminist quote-unquote retellings of Greek myths. I know you've seen the video essay on that too. I'll link it down below if you haven't, but you've seen that. So I want to take a minute to break down what makes a good retelling. The first thing I think is faithfulness to the spirit of the source material without necessarily being faithful to the details. It doesn't bother me that T.K. Kingfisher changed the way that the story unveiled or like made a different twist at the end. I don't think that's spoiling anything. It doesn't bother me that she changed the plot because it's still set in like a gothic mansion. It still has fun characters. It still has the same kind of point of view about loneliness and family and what it means to live in the middle of the countryside in total isolation from everybody, and like what it means to be kind of a bit of a weirdo. I also feel like the Netflix series, again, didn't follow the plot at all, but I think in a lot of ways it was successful in evoking the same feeling of kind of loneliness and despair that the original did. It didn't tell the same story, but I think you can clearly see where the inspiration was drawn from, and you can clearly see that that person really liked and respected that work, which I think is also part of being faithful to the spirit of something. If you are writing a hate letter to something, it's just, you can tell when a parody or a retelling is written by people who liked the thing versus people who hated the thing. And I think The Fall of the House of Usher is written by people who really liked the thing because they know what was good and they took those elements and made it their own, which you can't do if you just hate the thing. You don't know what's good about it because you're just trying to make a better thing that's not that thing while commenting on that thing, which I think is just less successful. That said, number 2, you can't make something that's inspired by something without somehow commenting on the thing. And if you are inevitably going to have to make a comment, you should make the comment an insightful one. As much as we like seeing the same tropes over and over, and as much as I would keep reading or watching Fall of the House of Usher based material, I don't want to read or listen to or watch the same story exactly over and over again. You have to bring something new to the table, and you have to thereby change some things, and those changes are a comment on the original work. This isn't a bad thing, but also if you're just adding stuff for the sake of it to be different or for the sake of it to be modern, that's not a good comment. You're just trying to update it for an audience that can already still go back and read the old work. The prose is not what I would write in 2024, but it's still very accessible. It's not written in Latin. It's not Shakespeare. It's easy to read comparatively to those things. If you're doing something to change something, that should tell us something. It should be for a purpose. For the sake of modernizing it is not a purpose, because we can just go back and read the original. It doesn't need to be modernized. We don't need to just add cell phones and be like, well, that's a book, that's done. Like, just have them scrolling on TikTok in the gothic falling down mansion. Yeah, that's all we needed. Building on that, I think the third thing is you need a refreshing new story within the story. Because again, we don't want to just be doing the exact same thing over and over. And while you're making that commentary on something that you wanted to change from the original, you also need to give us something new. Give us some new tidbits. And I think in the return of the House of Usher, this was wildly unsuccessful. All of the things that they added didn't comment on anything, and they weren't interesting. For example, the main character's alcoholism. It wasn't really a comment on alcoholism because he didn't really suffer any consequences. At one point, he gets really drunk after being fired from his journalism job, and he's like a little standoffish to the town whore which, like, to be clear, the town whore is how she's represented. I'm not like commenting. I'm not trying to slut shame this beautiful woman. Like, this is just a very flat character. So he gets really drunk. He has already slept with this woman, but then sees her again and is kind of rude to her. And she's like, "You drink too much, John Charles," and she walks away, and he comments on how good her ass looks while walking away. That's the only consequence, is that he doesn't get to sleep with her anymore. This woman that it's been established that he doesn't have any real interest in her personality. He likes that she's a town gossip, so he gets all the gossip and the good stuff for his work as a journalist. And he likes her ass. And he likes how pretty she is and how she's a status symbol for him to be fucking. But we don't get the sense that he actually likes this woman. in any way, or that they have any sort of real connection. It's very clear from the beginning that his secretary, the down on her luck single mom, is clearly the one that he's going to end up with, because she's like a smart, intelligent woman who like really helps him and understands him. And this girl is just like someone for him to fuck. And it just, not being able to do that, not being able to fuck that woman while subsequently getting the woman that you're like supposed to be with in a committed relationship, that's not a consequence. He doesn't like hurt himself. He doesn't suffer any major, he doesn't like get fired from his job because of his alcoholism. There's no consequence. He's independently wealthy, so it doesn't even matter if he has his job anyway. Like, they added this thing, and it was supposed to be a new part of the story, and it just was A, super fucking boring, and B, didn't comment on alcoholism as a thing. It was just a character trait that I think we were supposed to find endearing, and like supposed to be his flaw, quote unquote, but like, So like, I needed something new. Like, again, if you're going to retell this story, you have to add something. And Robert Poe did not add any. And my fourth point, after this incredibly long tangent, in order to tell a successful retelling, you have to be good at what you do as a writer. Whether that's for a screenplay, whether that's for a podcast or a book or whatever you're doing, if you're doing a retelling, you have to be good at what you do. Robert Poe is not good at what he does. Kingfisher is significantly better, and I think it requires a delicate hand to make something successful. This makes me immediately think of Willy's Wonderland versus the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Willy's Wonderland came out first, and it was clearly a retelling of the video game story. But one of these movies is fine. Narratively, totally fine. Totally a good time. Would watch. The other one makes no fucking sense. And maybe this is obvious and like goes without saying, but like, you can't just slap a new title on something, add a couple new characters, and call it a good retelling. You actually have to like have skill to do this. It's hard. Now that we've established how to do a good retelling, I would like to introduce my retelling of the return of the House of Usher. I'm calling it The Fall of the Return of the House of Usher. And it's a retelling set in the modern day, in the 2020s, where the female descendant of the Ushers from the first book comes back to slowly scare the male protagonist to death, so that she can have a threesome with the two love interests in the ruins of the old house. Because they deserve that. I don't believe that John Charles, the alcoholic, is giving them a lot of good orgasms, so I'm gonna fix that. And that's the thing that I wanted to add. A new layered story commenting on the first one and how bad in bed straight men are. It's gonna be like 50 Shades of Grey meets Edgar Allan Poe, and I think this is really what the world needs right now. You know? I think it's really gonna bring us all together. So, pre-order your copy now, or subscribe to my channel. All channel subscribers will get a free copy, whether you want one or not. It will magically appear on your bedside table to watch you while you sleep. Don't worry about sending me your address. I already have it. Please subscribe. No, wait, where are you going? No, stop. Come back.